The December wind cut through the platform like a blade, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. Clara Whitfield pressed herself against the depot wall, her once white wedding dress now gray with coal dust from the long journey. The delicate lace at her collar, lovingly stitched by her own hands over countless evenings, hung limp and torn. She clutched a worn carpetbag in one hand and a crumpled telegram in the other, her knuckles white against the cold. The train that had brought her to Frost Hollow wheezed its final breath of steam before lurching forward again, leaving her standing alone on the wooden platform. The conductor had given her a pitying look as she descended, his eyes sliding away when she'd asked if anyone was waiting. Now she understood why. The platform was empty. Clara's breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as she scanned the deserted street beyond the station. Frost Hollow spread before her like a painting done in shades of white and gray weathered buildings huddled against the mountain's base, their roofs thick with snow. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin columns, the only sign of life in the frozen landscape. She unfolded the telegram again, though she'd memorized every word during the 3-day journey from Ohio. Stop, arriving December 15th. Stop, will wear white dress as agreed. Stop, C. Whitfield. Below it, his response, stop, will meet train. Stop, look for man in black coat with red scarf. Stop, J. Morrison. But there was no man in a black coat, no red scarf, no James Morrison. A door creaked open across the street, and Clara's heart leaped. But the woman who emerged took one look at her and quickly averted her gaze, hurrying away with quick, nervous steps. Clara had seen that look before, the careful blindness people adopted when they didn't want to acknowledge something troublesome in their midst. "Ma'am," Clara called out, her voice cracking from cold and disuse. "Please, I'm looking for Mr. James Morrison. He was supposed to—" The woman walked faster, disappearing around a corner without acknowledging she'd heard. Clara's legs trembled. Whether from cold or the growing realization of her situation, she couldn't tell. She'd sold everything: her mother's china, her father's watch, even the small plot of land that was all that remained of her family's farm. Every penny had gone to the passage west and the new dress. James Morrison's letters had painted such vivid pictures: a thriving ranch, a house that needed a woman's touch, 2 young boys who needed a mother. He'd sent a photograph, handsome, kind-eyed, standing before a grand house. The wind picked up, driving snow horizontally across the platform. Clara's thin coat offered little protection. She'd imagined arriving to warmth, to welcome, to the beginning of a new life. Instead, she stood abandoned in a town that seemed determined to pretend she didn't exist. An old man shuffled past, his face weathered as old leather. Clara stepped forward desperately. "Sir, please, James Morrison. Do you know where I might find him?" The man paused, rheumy eyes studying her from beneath bushy brows. Something like pity flickered across his face. "Morrison." He shook his head slowly. "Ain't no Morrison in Frost Hollow. Miss, never has been." The words hit Clara like physical blows. But he wrote to me, many letters. He sent money for passage. He—" "Like I said," the old man interrupted gently, "ain't no Morrison here. You best get inside somewhere 'fore you freeze." He gestured vaguely toward the cluster of buildings that made up the town's main street, then continued on his way. Clara stood rooted to the platform, the truth settling over her like the snow cold, suffocating, undeniable. She'd been deceived, swindled, made a fool of by someone who'd never intended to marry her at all. The marriage broker in Cincinnati had seemed so respectable, his office so established. The letters from James Morrison had been so detailed, so full of promise. A sob rose in her throat, but she forced it down. Crying would solve nothing, and the tears would only freeze on her cheeks. She needed shelter, needed to think, needed to figure out how a woman with $7 to her name and no connections could survive in a frontier town that was already turning its back on her. The depot door stood slightly ajar. Clara pushed inside, grateful for even the marginal warmth. The small waiting room held 2 wooden benches and a pot-bellied stove that radiated feeble heat. The ticket window was closed, a sign reading "Next Train Tuesday" hanging crooked behind the bars. Tuesday, 3 days away. Clara sank onto the bench nearest the stove, her wedding dress pooling around her like spilled milk. Through the frosted window, she could see the town going about its business, people moving between buildings, a wagon struggling through the rutted snow, life continuing as if her world hadn't just collapsed. She opened her carpet bag with numb fingers, taking inventory of her possessions. 2 day dresses, worn but clean, undergarments, a nightgown, her mother's Bible, a small sewing kit, a daguerreotype of her parents, long dead, $7.38 wrapped in a handkerchief. Not enough for a ticket home. Not that there was any home to return to. The door burst open, bringing a swirl of snow and cold. Clara looked up hopefully, but it was just the station master, a thin man with suspicious eyes. "Station's closed, miss," he said without preamble. "Can't stay here." "Please," Clara began. "I'm waiting for someone." "Saw you get off the train. Saw nobody meet you neither. You can't stay here." His tone brooked no argument. "Hotel's 2 blocks down. Marston's boarding house is cheaper if you're looking to save money." Clara stood on unsteady legs. "How much is—" "More'n you got, I'd wager." The station master's eyes flicked over her dress, her bag, reading poverty in every line. "There's the church, I suppose. Reverend Danforth might—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Clara understood. The Reverend might help, or might not. A young woman arriving alone, claiming to be a bride with no groom in sight, it didn't paint a respectable picture. "Thank you," she managed, gathering her bag. Outside, the cold hit her anew. The sun was already low, casting long shadows across the snow. Soon it would be dark, and the temperature would drop further. Clara forced herself to move, 1 foot in front of the other, heading toward the main street. She passed the hotel, a 2-story building with warm light spilling from its windows. Through the glass, she could see people in the dining room, families gathered for early supper. Her empty stomach clenched, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since the stale bread and cheese that morning on the train. The boarding house sat further down, a narrow building squeezed between a hardware store and what appeared to be a saloon. The sign hanging above the door was faded, barely readable. Clara hesitated at the entrance, then knocked. A severe-looking woman answered, her hair pulled back so tightly it stretched her features. Her eyes swept over Clara, taking in the wedding dress, the carpet bag, the absence of a wedding ring. "No room," she said flatly, starting to close the door. "Please, I can pay." "I said no room." The door shut with finality. Clara stood on the doorstep, fighting the urge to pound on the door, to demand explanation. But she knew. A young woman alone, dressed for a wedding with no husband in evidence, the conclusion was obvious. Respectable boarding houses didn't take in such women. The church stood at the end of the street, its steeple a dark finger pointing at the gray sky. Clara made her way toward it, her feet numb in her thin boots. The wooden steps were slick with ice. She nearly fell twice climbing them. The door was locked. She rattled the handle, desperation rising. Surely a church wouldn't turn away someone in need, but the building remained stubbornly closed, its stained glass windows dark. "Reverend's gone to Carson City," a voice said behind her. "Won't be back for a week." Clara turned to find a young boy, perhaps 12, watching her with curious eyes. Is there anywhere else, any other lodging?" The boy's gaze dropped to her dress. Even a child could read the story written there. "Ma says there's places for women like—" He stopped, flushing. "I mean, there's other places, but Ma says respectable folks don't go there." Other places. Clara understood that too. In every frontier town, there were establishments that catered to certain kinds of women, places where questions weren't asked, where money mattered more than reputation. "Thank you," she said quietly. The boy scampered off, leaving her alone on the church steps. The wind had picked up again, and snow began falling in earnest heavy, wet flakes that clung to her hair and dress. Clara pulled her thin coat tighter, though it did little good. She couldn't go to those other places. Even if desperation drove her to their doors, she had nothing to offer, no skills in that particular trade, and once she crossed that threshold, there would be no going back, no respectable employment, no chance at a decent life. But what other choice did she have? Clara made her way back toward the depot, hoping the station master might have left it unlocked. She could shelter there overnight, perhaps slip out before he returned in the morning. It wasn't a solution, just a delay of the inevitable, but she was too cold and tired to think beyond the next few hours. The platform was deserted, snow already covering her footprints from earlier. She tried the door locked tight. Even the small overhang provided little shelter from the driving snow. Clara sank down against the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. The wedding dress, so carefully chosen, so hopefully worn, was now a cruel joke-thin fabric that offered no warmth, white lace that marked her as abandoned goods. She thought of home, not the empty house she'd left, but the home of her childhood, her mother's warm kitchen, her father's steady presence. Both gone now, victims of the fever that had swept through Ohio 2 winters past. She'd held on as long as she could, tried to work the farm alone, but a woman couldn't do such work. Everyone said, sell the land, find a husband, make a new life. The marriage broker had seemed like salvation. Respectable men out west, he'd said, desperate for good wives. Ranchers and merchants and miners who'd made their fortunes but lacked feminine companionship. She'd chosen James Morrison from the stack of letters his had been so warm, so full of details about daily life. The photograph had shown a handsome face, kind eyes. All lies, sweet poison pen lies that had led her here, to freeze on a platform in a town that wanted nothing to do with her. The snow fell heavier now, building small drifts against her skirts. Clara's teeth chattered uncontrollably. She knew, with the detached clarity that comes with extreme cold, that she couldn't survive the night outside. The boarding house, the hotel, the locked church all had made their position clear. That left only those other places, or what death by cold seemed almost preferable to the alternative. At least it would be clean, honorable in its way. They'd find her in the spring, perhaps when the snow melted. A cautionary tale for other foolish women who believed in fairy tales and mail-order promises. Clara closed her eyes, letting the snow accumulate on her shoulders, in her hair. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper through the wind, "The Lord helps those who help themselves, child." But sometimes, Clara thought drowsily, there was no help to be had. Sometimes you simply ran out of choices, ran out of chances, ran out of hope. The world narrowed to the cold, the snow, and the growing numbness in her extremities. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the faint sound of boots on wooden planks, but it seemed very far away, like something from a dream. She didn't open her eyes, didn't want to see another townsperson carefully looking away. Let them find her in the morning. Let them feel guilty then, when it was too late. The footsteps stopped nearby. Clara waited for them to continue past, but they didn't. Someone was standing there, watching her freeze. "You can't stay here," a deep voice said, not unkind, but matter-of-fact. Clara forced her eyes open, though it took effort. A man stood before her, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a long black coat and a sheriff's star that caught what little light remained. His face was hard to make out in the gathering darkness, but she could see he was clean-shaven, somewhere in his 30s. "I have nowhere else to go," she heard herself say, surprised her voice still worked. The sheriff, for that's what he must be, studied her for a long moment. His gaze took in the wedding dress, the carpet bag, the absence of a ring, just as everyone else's had, but something in his expression was different. Not pity, exactly. More like recognition. "Morrison?" he asked quietly. Clara nodded, too tired to be surprised that he knew. "There is no Morrison," the sheriff said. "Never was. You're the third one this year." The third one. The word should have hurt, but Clara was beyond feeling. At least she wasn't alone in her foolishness. "The others," she managed through chattering teeth. "What happened to them?" The sheriff's jaw tightened. "One took the Tuesday train back east. The other—" He didn't finish, but Clara could guess. Those other places had gained a new resident. "Well," Clara said with bitter humor, "at least I won't have to worry about it much longer." She gestured weakly at the snow building around her. The sheriff stood silent for a moment longer. Then he reached down, grasped her arm, and hauled her to her feet. "Come on." "I told you, I have nowhere—" "You're coming with me," he said firmly. "You can't stay here." Clara tried to pull away, panic rising. Was he arresting her? Was being abandoned a crime now, too? "I haven't done anything wrong." "I know." His voice was quieter now. "But freezing to death on my watch would be— Come on." He kept his hand on her arm, not roughly but firmly, guiding her off the platform. Clara had no strength to resist. Her feet, numb in their thin boots, stumbled through the snow. The sheriff slowed his pace to match hers, patient despite the worsening weather. They walked in silence through the swirling snow. Clara caught glimpses of curious faces in windows, quickly withdrawn. The sheriff's presence beside her seemed to create a bubble of space. People who might have approached stayed back, watching but not interfering. This wasn't the arrival she'd dreamed of during those long nights in Ohio, reading James Morrison's letters by candlelight. There was no warm welcome, no loving groom, no new family eager to embrace her. Just cold and snow and a stern-faced lawman who probably saw her as another problem to be solved. But he hadn't left her to freeze. That was something. As they walked deeper into the town, Clara allowed herself one last thought of the life that should have been the ranch, the house, the children who needed a mother. Then she let it go, watching it disappear into the swirling snow like everything else she'd once believed in. Whatever came next, it couldn't be worse than what she'd left behind on that platform. And if it was, well, at least she'd be warm when she faced it. The sheriff's stride never faltered, leading her into the darkening town with the steady certainty of a man who knew exactly where he was going. Clara followed, having no choice but to trust this stranger who'd pulled her from the snow. Behind them, the depot platform stood empty once more, her footprints already filling with fresh snow, as if she'd never been there at all. Sheriff Elias Moore led her through the snow-covered streets without speaking, his boots creating a steady rhythm against the frozen ground. Clara struggled to keep pace, her numb feet catching on hidden ruts beneath the snow. The buildings they passed were shuttered against the storm, warm lamplight seeping through cracks in curtains, reminding her of all the homes that would never welcome her. The sheriff's office sat squat and solid on the corner of Main and Cedar, its wooden sign creaking in the wind. Elias pushed open the heavy door, holding it for Clara to stumble through. The sudden warmth hit her like a physical force, making her skin prickle painfully as feeling began to return. The office was sparse but clean, a desk covered in neat stacks of paper, 2 cells along the back wall, a pot-bellied stove radiating blessed heat. A rifle rack on the wall held 3 weapons, and wanted posters were tacked in orderly rows beside the door. "Sit," Elias said, gesturing to a wooden chair near the stove. Clara sank into it gratefully, her wedding dress pooling around her in damp folds. She watched as the sheriff moved about the room with practiced efficiency, adding wood to the stove, filling a battered coffee pot from a pitcher. He worked in silence, and Clara found herself studying him in the lamplight. Elias Moore was perhaps 35, with dark hair cut short and a clean-shaven face that might have been handsome if it weren't set in such stern lines. His movements were economical, controlled a man who'd learned not to waste energy on unnecessary gestures. "The telegram came 2 weeks ago," he said suddenly, his back still to her as he adjusted the coffee pot on the stove. "From a sheriff in Kansas, warning about a confidence man working the marriage brokers, using the name James Morrison among others." Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "You knew? I knew someone might come." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Didn't know when. The Tuesday train doesn't always carry brides." "The third one this year." Clara repeated his earlier words. "How long has this been happening?" 6 months, maybe more. The first girl, Sarah. She had family to return to. Sold what jewelry she had for train fare. Elias pulled a second chair near the stove, sitting across from her but maintaining careful distance. "The second." "The other places," Clara finished quietly. A muscle tightened in his jaw. "Mary. That was her name. 17 years old." He stared at the stove as if seeing something else in its glow. "Found her frozen behind the Crimson Bell 3 weeks later. They'd thrown her out when she got sick." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the coffee pot's beginning bubble. Clara shivered despite the warmth, imagining another girl in a wedding dress. Another set of hopes dashed against Frost Hollow's indifference. "Why didn't you stop it?" she asked. "If you knew." "Stop what, a man I can't identify? Operating from who knows where. The brokers claim ignorance. The victims," he glanced at her, "rarely want to press charges. They just want to disappear. Forget it happened." "So you do nothing?" His eyes flashed, the first real emotion she'd seen from him. "I do what I can, which is why you're sitting here instead of freezing on that platform." Clara looked down at her hands, ashamed of her accusation. He was right. He'd done more than anyone else in this town. Elias rose to pour the coffee, handing her a tin cup. The heat burned her frozen fingers, but she welcomed the pain. It meant she was still alive, still capable of feeling. "Drink," he ordered. "Then we'll figure out what to do with you." "I have some money," Clara began, though the $7 seemed more pitiful by the moment. "Perhaps if there's work." "What kind of work can you do?" "I can sew, cook, keep house. I managed my father's farm accounts before." She stopped, realizing how desperate she sounded. Elias studied her over his own cup. "Mrs. Henley might need kitchen help at the hotel. The Mercantile sometimes takes clerks, but they won't hire me," Clara finished. "Not a woman who arrived alone, dressed for a wedding with no groom." He didn't deny it. In a town this small, reputation was everything, and hers was already tainted by association with a swindle. "I could write to my cousin in Chicago," Clara said, though the thought of admitting her foolishness to family made her stomach clench. "If I could earn enough for passage." "That's 300 miles and 2 train changes. In winter. With what money?" The brutal practicality of his words crushed the fragile hope before it could form. Clara set down her cup with shaking hands, the full weight of her situation settling over her like a burial shroud. "Then I have no options." "There's always options," Elias said quietly. "Some just cost more than others." Clara met his gaze, searching for meaning in his words. His face remained impassive, but something in his eyes, a flicker of understanding, perhaps made her wonder what costs he'd paid in his own life. "You're not wearing a ring," she observed, then flushed at her boldness. "I'm sorry, that's not—" "My wife died 2 years ago," he said simply. "Consumption." The word hung between them, carrying all the weight of loss and loneliness it implied. Clara thought of Mary, the 17-year-old who died behind the Crimson Bell. Had she coughed blood onto her wedding dress before they'd thrown her out? "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. Elias shrugged, a gesture that tried for indifference and failed. "Life out here is hard on women, always has been. Yet they keep sending for us. Men get lonely, women get desperate. His mouth twisted in what might have been bitter humor. "Makes for a profitable business, if you don't mind trading in misery." Clara wrapped her hands around the empty cup, seeking warmth that was no longer there. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the windows. The storm was worsening. "I can't let you go back out in this," Elias said abruptly. "But you can't stay here. Not proper. You spending the night in the jail?" "Propriety seems a bit late to worry about," Clara said with a hollow laugh. "Maybe, but this town has rules, even if they're hypocritical ones." He stood, pacing to the window. "There's a room upstairs, storage mostly, but it has a cot. You can stay there tonight. And tomorrow." He turned back to her, and she saw the weariness in his features, a man who'd been sheriff long enough to know he couldn't save everyone, but who kept trying anyway. "Tomorrow we'll see if any of the church ladies are feeling charitable. Sometimes they surprise me." He paused. "Don't count on it, though." Clara nodded, understanding. One night's reprieve. After that, she'd be back where she started, minus the excuse of an immediate blizzard. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "The others in town, they couldn't look away fast enough, but you—" Elias was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, meant only for the small circle of warmth around the stove. "My wife, Margaret, she came out here as a mail-order bride too. Only difference was, I actually existed." He moved back to his chair, suddenly looking older than his years. "I watched what this town put her through before they accepted her. The whispers, the turned backs, the good women who wouldn't let her join their sewing circles. But she was properly married. Didn't matter. She was an outsider who'd advertised for a husband. In their minds, that was only one step above." He gestured vaguely toward the window, toward those other places Clara was trying so hard to avoid. "What changed their minds?" "Time. My badge helped some, but mostly it was her. Margaret had a way of wearing people down with kindness. Took near a year before Mrs. Henley would even nod to her on the street." His expression softened with memory. "She never complained, but I knew it hurt her. Being lonely in a crowd is worse than being alone." Clara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not in front of this man who'd shown her more consideration in an hour than anyone else had all day. "I'm not asking for a year," she said quietly. "Just long enough to figure out how to leave." "That's what Mary said too." The words chilled more than the storm outside. Clara saw the trap clearly now. Without money for passage, she couldn't leave. Without respectable work, she couldn't earn money. Without a good reputation, she couldn't find respectable work. Round and round until the only option left was the one that killed you, either quickly like Mary or slowly like all the others. "There has to be another way," she insisted. "If you find it, let me know." Elias stood, all business again. "I'll help you with the Morrison business. At least, file a report. Send telegrams to other sheriffs. Might catch him eventually." "And if you do?" "He'll get a few months in jail, maybe a year. Then he'll get out and do it again under a different name." He shrugged. "Law's not much help with broken promises and stolen dreams." Clara rose on unsteady legs, exhaustion hitting her all at once. The warmth had made her drowsy, and the thought of a cot, even in a storage room, seemed like luxury. Elias led her to a narrow staircase at the back of the office. The steps creaked under their weight, and Clara had to duck to avoid a low beam. The room at the top was small and dusty, filled with boxes and old furniture, but true to his word, there was a cot in the corner with a wool blanket. "Privy's out back," he said, lighting a lamp and setting it on a crate. "I'll leave the office door unlocked in case you need anything." He turned to go, then paused at the doorway. "What you said before, about me doing nothing, you were partly right. I can't stop men like Morrison. Can't change how this town thinks, but I can make sure no more girls freeze to death on my watch. It's not much, but it's something. It's more than something, Clara said softly. Thank you. He nodded once and disappeared down the stairs. Clara listened to his footsteps, then the scrape of his chair as he settled back at his desk. She wasn't truly alone, there was comfort in that. She removed her wet boots and outer dress, hanging them from nails in the wall. The wedding gown would be ruined, but she couldn't bring herself to care. It represented a life that had never existed anyway. Wrapping herself in the blanket, Clara lay on the narrow cot and stared at the rafters. Somewhere out there, James Morrison, or whatever his real name was, might be writing to another lonely woman, spinning tales of a prosperous ranch and motherless children. Tomorrow, another girl might board a train, heart full of hope, dressed in white. But tonight, Clara Whitfield was warm and safe, if only temporarily, in a town that wanted to forget she existed. One man had remembered his humanity. It wasn't the new beginning she'd dreamed of, but it was something. As sleep finally claimed her, she thought she understood why Elias Moore carried such weariness in his eyes. In a place like Frost Hollow, small kindnesses were acts of rebellion, and rebellion was exhausting, but he kept fighting anyway, one rescued girl at a time. It wasn't enough to change the world, but tonight it had been enough to save her. The lamp flickered low, casting dancing shadows on the storage room walls. Below, she could hear the sheriff moving about, the scratch of his pen on paper writing those reports he'd promised, trying to catch a ghost who destroyed lives for profit. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new rejections, new reminders of how far she'd fallen. But tonight, Clara Whitfield existed. Someone had seen her freezing and had chosen to act. In a frontier town built on rigid rules and careful blindness, that felt like a miracle. She closed her eyes, letting exhaustion pull her under. The last thing she heard was the wind howling outside, but it seemed distant now, unable to touch her in this small, dusty sanctuary above the sheriff's office. For the first time since stepping off the train, Clara felt something besides despair. Not quite hope she wasn't foolish enough for that anymore, but a tiny spark of possibility. Carefully tended by a stern-faced sheriff who understood the weight of being an outsider, it would have to be enough. Clara woke to the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Gray morning light filtered through the single window, revealing dust motes dancing in the cold air. She sat up quickly, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders as Sheriff Moore appeared in the doorway. "There's coffee downstairs," he said without preamble, "and some biscuits from yesterday." She nodded, waiting for him to leave before struggling into her still damp dress. The wedding gown was indeed ruined, water stains and dirt marking the white fabric like a map of her folly. Clara tried to smooth the worst wrinkles, then gave up. What did it matter now? Downstairs, Elias had laid out a simple breakfast on his desk. He stood by the window, watching the street, giving her privacy to eat. Clara was grateful for his tact. She was hungry enough to forget manners, wolfing down the hard biscuits and gulping the bitter coffee. "Storm passed in the night," he said, still facing away. "Roads should be clear enough by Tuesday for the train." Tuesday, 3 days to figure out her life. "I've been thinking," Clara ventured. "Perhaps if I spoke to people directly, explained my situation." "Already did that." He turned, and she saw he'd been up most of the night's shadows under his eyes, stubble darkening his jaw. "Spoke to Mrs. Henley at the hotel, Thompson at the Mercantile, even tried the widow Garrett who takes in washing." "And?" His silence was answer enough. "I see." Clara set down her cup carefully, afraid she might throw it otherwise. "So I'm to be punished for being a victim of fraud." "That's how towns like this work. They protect their own by keeping others out." Elias moved to his desk, shuffling papers with unnecessary focus. "There might be one option, but you won't like it." "I'm listening." "My place." "Not like that," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "I need help with my daughter. Since Margaret died, I've been paying Mrs. Olson to watch her during the day. But she's been saying she can't do it much longer. Her own health isn't what it was. Clara blinked, surprised. You have a daughter? Lily. She's 6. Something in his face softened at the name. Been difficult since her mother passed. Doesn't speak much, barely eats, misses. Olson says she just sits by the window most days, watching for something, or someone. And you want me to look after her, cook, clean, the things Margaret used to do. It's not charity, he said firmly. I'd pay wages not much, but enough to save for train fare. You'd have room and board, proper employment. Clara's mind raced. It was a solution, of sorts, but living in the sheriff's house, even as hired help, what would people say? Nothing they're not already saying. His frankness was brutal, but oddly comforting. But there'd be rules. You'd have the back bedroom. I'd make that clear. Mrs. Olson would come by regular to check on things. Keep it respectable. And it would be temporary just until you earned enough to leave. Or until the good wives of Frost Hollow run me out of town. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. They'd have to go through me first. Clara studied him. This taciturn man offering her a lifeline wrapped in proprieties. It wasn't ideal, nothing about her situation was, but it was better than the alternatives. Can I meet her first, Lily? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or approval. She's at home. We can go now if you're ready. Clara stood, smoothing her ruined dress one more time. I have nothing else to wear. Will she? Lily doesn't much care what people wear. He grabbed his coat and hat. Come on. They walked through the morning streets, snow crunching beneath their boots. A few early risers stared openly at Clara in her stained wedding dress. But Elias's presence seemed to create a buffer. No one approached. No one spoke. But she felt their judgment like physical weight. His house sat on the edge of town, a modest 2-story structure with smoke rising from the chimney. It was well maintained, but somehow empty-looking, as if the life had been drained from it. Margaret planted those, Elias said, gesturing to the bare rose bushes flanking the porch. Never could get them to bloom after she died, like they knew. Inside, the house was painfully neat, everything in its place but lacking warmth. A woman's touch remained in small details, embroidered cushions, china shepherdesses on the mantel, but dust had settled over it all like grief. Lily, Elias called. Mrs. Olson. An elderly woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her sharp eyes took in Clara's appearance, lips thinning with disapproval. She's upstairs, Mrs. Olson said. Wouldn't come down for breakfast again. This is Miss Whitfield, Elias said. She might be helping with Lily. Mrs. Olson's sniff conveyed volumes. I see. Well, I've left soup on the stove. I'll be back tomorrow. She gathered her things with pointed efficiency, pausing at the door. Sheriff, a word. They stepped onto the porch, voices low but carrying through the thin walls. Know what you're thinking, but that woman is none of your concern beyond checking on proprieties. Elias cut her off. Which you've agreed to do. For the child's sake, Mrs. Olson said. That poor mite doesn't need more upheaval. No, she needs someone who'll stay longer than an hour a day. Their voices faded as Mrs. Olson left. Elias returned, jaw tight with suppressed anger. She means well, he said, though it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. She's protective of Lily, Clara offered. That's not a bad thing. He studied her, something shifting in his expression. Come on, she'll be in her room. They climbed the narrow stairs. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly open. Elias knocked gently. Lily, there's someone I'd like you to meet. No response. He pushed the door wider, revealing a small room painted yellow sunshine trying to break through clouds. A little girl sat by the window, dark hair hanging in uncombed tangles, still in her nightgown despite the hour. She didn't turn when they entered. "Lily," Elias said again, voice gentler than Clara had heard it. "This is Miss Whitfield." The child remained motionless, staring out at the snow-covered yard. Clara could see her profile, delicate features that must have come from her mother, but shadowed with a grief too heavy for such small shoulders. "Hello, Lily," Clara said softly. "Nothing." Elias's face tightened with familiar pain. "She's been like this for months. The doctor says there's nothing physically wrong, that she'll come back when she's ready, but—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. Clara recognized the gesture, helplessness disguised as frustration. "May I?" she asked, moving toward the window. He nodded. Clara approached slowly, as she would a spooked animal. She didn't try to touch the child or demand attention. Instead, she knelt beside the window, following Lily's gaze. "It's pretty, isn't it?" she said conversationally. "All that white, like the world is sleeping under a blanket." Lily's eyes flickered toward her, just for a moment. "I used to watch snow from my window, too," Clara continued. "Back in Ohio, I'd make up stories about what was happening under all that white. Secret tunnels where rabbits were having tea parties. Fairy kingdoms where everything was made of ice." The child's hands, which had been folded in her lap, twitched slightly. "But my favorite was the story about the lost fox," Clara said, settling more comfortably on the floor. "Would you like to hear it?" Still no response, but Lily's body had turned slightly, angling toward Clara's voice. "Once upon a time, there was a little fox who got separated from her family in a blizzard." Clara wove the tale gently, making no demands, expecting nothing. She talked about the brave little fox who found shelter in a hollow log, who made friends with a wise old owl, who discovered that being lost wasn't the same as being alone. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then, so soft Clara almost missed it, Lily spoke. Did she find them her family? Clara's heart clenched at the small, hoarse voice. She found a new family, different from the one she lost, but just as warm. Lily turned then, fully facing Clara for the first time. Her eyes were gray like her father's, but held depths no 6-year-old should possess. "My mama's under the snow," she said matter-of-factly. "She can't come back." "No," Clara agreed gently. "She can't. So Mrs. Olson says she's in heaven, but I think she's just cold." Clara heard Elias's sharp intake of breath behind her, but didn't turn. This moment belonged to Lily. "Maybe she's both," Clara suggested. "Maybe her body is cold, but the part that loved you, the warm part that went somewhere else. Somewhere it never snows." Lily considered this with grave concentration. "Papa doesn't cry, but I hear him at night sometimes, walking around. It's hard when someone leaves. Even grown-ups get sad." "Are you sad?" The question caught Clara off guard. "Yes, I came here to meet someone, but they weren't real, so I'm sad about that. Like when I wait for Mama and she doesn't come. Something like that." Lily studied her with those two knowing eyes. "You're wearing a wedding dress." "Yes, but you're dirty." "Yes, Mama would have given you a clean dress," Lily said, then more quietly. "She was nice like that." Clara felt tears threaten but held them back. "She sounds lovely. She smelled like roses." "Papa's roses don't smell anymore." They sat in silence, two souls shipwrecked by different storms. Finally, Lily spoke again. "Are you staying—" Clara glanced at Elias, who stood frozen in the doorway, watching his daughter have her longest conversation in months. "For a while," Clara said carefully. "If you'd like me to." Lily turned back to the window. "The fox in your story, was she scared?" "Very scared. But she was okay." "She was okay." The child nodded, apparently satisfied. "You can stay, but only if you tell more stories. I have lots of stories." "Good." Lily's attention drifted back to the snow, but her posture had relaxed slightly, no longer quite so vigilant. Clara rose carefully, joints protesting from kneeling on the hard floor. Elias stepped aside to let her pass, and she saw something raw in his expression, hope wrestling with fear. They descended the stairs in silence. In the kitchen, Elias gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. She hasn't. He stopped, cleared his throat. She hasn't talked that much since the funeral. She's been waiting, Clara said softly. Sometimes we get so fixed on waiting for one thing, we can't see anything else. Maybe a stranger's what she needed, someone who couldn't be her mother, so she didn't have to keep watching for her. Elias looked at her with new consideration. You understand loss? I've had practice. He straightened. All business again, but with something warmer beneath. The job's yours if you want it. Room, board, and $2 a week. Mrs. Olson will check in daily. And I'll make it clear to everyone that you're hired help. Nothing more. It's not much. It's enough, Clara interrupted. It's more than enough. You'll need clothes. Margaret's things are still... He gestured vaguely upward. You're of a size. Take what you need. The practicality of wearing a dead woman's clothes should have disturbed her, but Clara was past such concerns. Thank you. I work long hours. Sometimes I'm called out at night. Can you handle that? I managed a farm alone. I can manage a house. And Lily, she has bad nights, nightmares. Sometimes she just stands in the hallway, calling for her mother. I'll be here. He studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him. Then we have an agreement. He moved toward the door, then paused. Why did you ask to meet her first? Most people would have just taken the job. Clara thought of the little girl upstairs, keeping vigil for a mother who would never return. Because she's lost enough. She doesn't need someone else who'll leave without warning. You're planning to leave, though, when you have the money. Yes, but she'll know. I won't just disappear one day. Clara met his gaze. I may have been foolish enough to believe in James Morrison, but I keep my word. Elias nodded slowly. Get settled in. The back bedroom has its own entrance use that, when you can, helps with appearances. He put on his hat. I'll be at the office. There's food in the pantry. Wood for the stoves. Make a list of what else you need. He left, and Clara stood alone in the kitchen of a dead woman whose husband she'd be working for and whose child she'd be raising. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd put on her wedding dress in Ohio. But it was a life. More than she'd had this morning. Clara climbed the stairs again, stopping at what must have been Margaret's room. She pushed open the door, breathing in the faint scent of roses and dust. The wardrobe held practical dresses, well-made and carefully maintained. She selected a brown wool suitable for housework, trying not to think about the woman who'd worn it last. From down the hall came a small voice. Miss Clara. She'd been promoted from Miss Whitfield already. Yes, Lily. Will you tell me another story about the fox? Clara smiled. The first real smile in days. Let me change first, and then I'll tell you all about how the fox learned to build a new den. With a family? With a family, Clara confirmed. She closed the door to Margaret's room, brown dress over her arm. Somewhere in this house of grief, a little girl was waiting for a story. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The wedding dress would have to be cleaned and packed away, a reminder of the life that never was. But perhaps that was fitting. The woman who'd boarded the train in Ohio, full of hope and dreams of romance, had frozen to death on that platform. The woman who remained would tell stories, cook meals, and help a silent child find her voice again. She'd earn her wages honestly and save every penny for escape. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd believed in, but maybe, Clara thought as she headed back to Lily's room, that was the point. Real life didn't come with guaranteed happy endings. Sometimes you just had to build your own shelter and wait for the storm to pass. The first week passed in careful routines. Clara rose before dawn to start the stoves, prepared breakfast, and had coffee ready when Elias came downstairs. He ate in silence, nodded his thanks, and left for the sheriff's office. She cleaned, cooked, and mended while Lily shadowed her movements, never speaking but always watching. The house revealed itself slowly. Margaret's presence lingered in unexpected places, a recipe box filled with neat handwriting, lavender sachets tucked between linens, a half-finished sampler reading, "Home is where love lives." Clara handled these remnants respectfully, understanding she was merely a custodian of another woman's life. Mrs. Olson arrived each morning like clockwork, sharp eyes searching for impropriety. She examined the sleeping arrangements, checked that Clara used the back entrance, and counted the silverware as if expecting theft. Clara endured the scrutiny without complaint. The old woman was protecting Lily the only way she knew how. The child seems calmer, Mrs. Olson admitted grudgingly on the fourth day, finding Lily helping Clara fold laundry. "She's a good helper," Clara said simply. Mrs. Olson harumphed, but Clara caught her watching Lily with something softer than suspicion. The evenings fell into their own rhythm. After supper, Clara would build up the fire in the parlor and tell Lily stories. The little fox had many adventures, now finding honey with a clever bear, helping baby birds learn to fly, discovering that home wasn't a place but the beings who loved you. Elias usually returned during story time. He never joined them by the fire, instead sitting at his desk with paperwork. But Clara noticed how his pen would stop moving when she reached exciting parts of the tale. On the 7th night, as Clara tucked Lily into bed, the child grabbed her hand. "Miss Clara, will the fox ever find her first family?" Clara sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe someday. But even if she does, she'll never forget her second family. Love doesn't divide, it multiplies." Lily pondered this. "Like how I can love Mama in heaven and still like you." Clara's throat tightened. "Exactly like that." "I'm glad you came," Lily whispered. "Even if the bad man lied to you." Clara smoothed the child's dark hair. "So am I." She descended to find Elias standing by the parlor window, staring out at the darkness. Without turning, he spoke. "She's talking more, eating better too. Mrs. Olson says she actually laughed today when the cat got into the cream." "She's finding her way back," Clara said softly. "Children are resilient when they feel safe." Margaret used to say that. He turned, and Clara saw exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "I tried, after she died. But every time I looked at Lily, I saw her mother. The same eyes, the same smile when she used to smile. It was too much," Clara finished. He nodded. "So I worked longer hours, told myself the town needed me. Really, I was just running. He moved to his desk, shuffling papers unnecessarily. "You're good with her. Better than I expected." "I had younger siblings once, before the fever took them." Clara hadn't meant to share that, but something about the lamp-lit room invited confessions. "How many?" "2. Samuel was 8, Rebecca 6, same age as Lily." She swallowed past the familiar ache. "They love stories too." Silence stretched between them, filled with understanding. They were both refugees from loss, trying to build something from the wreckage. "I should go," Clara said finally. "Early morning tomorrow." "Wait." Elias opened a desk drawer, withdrawing a small pouch. "Your first week's wages, plus a bit extra for clothes and such. Can't have my housekeeper wearing the same dress every day. People talk enough as it is." Clara took the pouch, surprised by its weight. "This is too much." "It's fair. You're doing more than cooking and cleaning." He gestured upward, toward where Lily slept. "That's worth more than $2 a week." Their eyes met across the lamp-lit space. Clara saw gratitude there, And something else, a recognition between two people who understood that sometimes salvation came in unexpected forms. "Good night, Sheriff Moore." "Good night, Miss Whitfield." Clara slipped out the back door into the frigid night. The separate entrance maintained propriety, but the short walk to the kitchen door had become a moment of transition. Outside, she was the fallen woman, the mail-order bride nobody wanted. Inside, she was Miss Clara who told stories and made Lily smile. 3 more days passed peacefully. Then came market day. Clara had avoided town since arriving at the Moore house, but they needed supplies. She dressed carefully in one of Margaret's plainest dresses, pinned her hair severely, and tried to look like what she was hired help. Nothing more. "Can we come?" Lily asked, already reaching for her coat. Clara hesitated. Taking Lily would cement her position as the Moore's housekeeper, but it might also draw unwanted attention to the child. "If you stay close," Clara decided, "and mind your manners." They walked hand in hand through the slushy streets. Lily chattered about the fox's latest adventure, her voice carrying in the cold air. Several women stopped to stare at the child who hadn't been seen in public for months, at the woman holding her hand. The mercantile was busy with Saturday shoppers. Conversation stuttered to a halt when Clara entered. She felt the weight of their judgment but kept her chin high, focusing on her list. "Mrs. Olson usually does our shopping," the clerk said coldly. "Mrs. Olson is no longer able," Clara replied evenly. "I'm the Moore's housekeeper now." Whispers rippled through the store. Clara ignored them, selecting flour, salt, and other necessities. Lily stayed close, her small hand gripping Clara's skirt. "That's her," someone muttered. "The one who came for that Morrison fellow. Shameless, moving in with the sheriff. And him with a child in the house." "Miss Clara makes good biscuits," Lily announced suddenly, her clear voice cutting through the gossip. "And she tells the best stories. Papa smiles sometimes now." The store fell silent. Lily looked around with innocent curiosity, unaware of the bomb she'd detonated. Clara quickly finished her purchases and guided Lily outside. Her hands shook as she adjusted her packages, but not from cold. "Did I say something wrong?" Lily asked anxiously. "No, sweetheart, you said exactly right." They were halfway home when footsteps hurried behind them. Clara turned to find a young woman, perhaps 25, with kind eyes and work-worn hands. "Excuse me," the woman said breathlessly. "I'm Ruth Garrett. I heard what happened at the station, what was supposed to happen. Clara stiffened, preparing for more judgment. "I wanted to say," Ruth continued, "that what you're doing for the Moore family is good, real good. My husband and I, we knew Margaret. She'd be glad someone's caring for Lily proper again." "Thank you," Clara managed, surprised by the unexpected kindness. Ruth glanced around nervously. "I take in washing, if you ever need help, and my husband Tom does carpentry, just if you need anything." She hurried away before Clara could respond. "She was nice," Lily observed. "Yes," Clara agreed thoughtfully. "She was." Perhaps not everyone in Frost Hollow was determined to see her fail. That evening, Elias returned home earlier than usual, his face tight with suppressed anger. "I heard about the mercantile," he said without preamble. "It was fine." It wasn't fine. He paced the kitchen like a caged animal. "You shouldn't have to endure that because of my family." "Lily defended us beautifully," Clara said, trying to lighten his mood. "Apparently, I make good biscuits and you smile sometimes now." He stopped pacing. "She said that to the entire store." A reluctant smile tugged at his mouth, the first real one Clara had seen. It transformed his face, revealing the man Margaret must have fallen in love with. "That's my girl," he said softly. Then, more seriously, "I'll speak to Thompson at the mercantile. Make it clear you're to be treated with respect." "That might make things worse." "I'm the sheriff," My employees deserve basic courtesy. His tone brooked no argument. Besides, Ruth Garrett approached you. You heard about that, too. Small town. I hear everything eventually. He studied her face. The Garretts are good people. If Ruth offered friendship, it's genuine. One friend in a town of enemies. Better than none. He moved toward his study, then paused. Clara. It was the first time he'd used her given name. Yes. Thank you, for Lily, for everything. He disappeared before she could respond, leaving Clara standing in the kitchen with warmth blooming in her chest that had nothing to do with the stove. That night, as she settled Lily for bed, the child had a request. Can the fox make a friend tomorrow? A rabbit, maybe. I think that's a wonderful idea, Clara agreed. Someone who doesn't care that she came from somewhere else. Someone who just likes her for who she is. Clara kissed the child's forehead. The very best kind of friend. She was closing Lily's door when she heard its soft humming from the master bedroom. Elias, humming something low and tuneless as he prepared for bed. The sound was rusty, as if happiness was a language he was slowly remembering. Clara crept downstairs, not wanting to intrude on the moment, but as she banked the fires for the night, she found herself humming too the first time music had come to her since leaving Ohio. The house was changing, she realized, still shadowed by loss, still careful with boundaries, but warming like spring soil. She thought of the fox in her stories, building a new den stick by careful stick. Perhaps that's what they were all doing. Elias, Lily, and herself, building something new from the wreckage of their plans. It wasn't the life any of them had expected, but expectations were just another word for disappointments waiting to happen. Real life was messier, harder, but also capable of unexpected grace, like a kind word from a stranger, like a child's fierce defense, like a stern man learning to hum again. Clara added another log to the kitchen stove, already planning tomorrow's bread. She had flour now, and yeast, and a warm kitchen to work in. She had wages slowly accumulating, each dollar a step closer to where? The question that had consumed her was beginning to blur at the edges. She still meant to leave, of course she did. This was temporary, just shelter in a storm. But storms had a way of changing landscapes. And sometimes, Clara thought as she headed to her borrowed room, the fox discovered that the temporary den had somehow become home when she wasn't paying attention. Time would tell. For now, it was enough to have a roof overhead, a child to care for, and the faint sound of humming drifting through the old house like a promise of better days to come. The evening started like any other. Clara had prepared beef stew, fresh bread, and preserved peaches for dessert. Lily helped set the table, carefully placing each fork and spoon, taking pride in doing things the way Mama liked. Elias arrived home just as Clara was ladling stew into bowls, bringing with him the scent of cold air and wood smoke. They ate in companionable quiet, punctuated by Lily's observations about her day, how the icicles on the porch looked like castle towers, how Mrs. Olson's cat had left paw prints in the snow. These small dinner-time conversations had become precious, moments when they almost felt like a real family. After supper, they moved to the parlor for the nightly ritual. Clara settled into the rocking chair by the fire. Lily curled on the rug at her feet, while Elias took his usual place at the desk. But tonight, Clara noticed he hadn't brought any paperwork. Tell about the fox finding the rabbit friend, Lily reminded her, already anticipating the story. Clara began weaving the tale. The little fox had been exploring her new forest for many days when she heard a sound thump, thump, thump. Following the noise, she discovered a rabbit stuck in a hollow log. As she spoke, Clara became aware of Elias watching them, not pretending to work while listening, but openly observing. His expression was unreadable in the lamplight, but something in his posture had softened. The rabbit was scared, Clara continued, because everyone knew foxes and rabbits weren't supposed to be friends. But the little fox said, "I'm not like other foxes. I'm a fox who got lost and found a new way to be." Lily wiggled closer, her hand finding Clara's knee. And the rabbit believed her. Not at first. Trust takes time to grow, like flowers under snow. But the fox kept coming back, bringing berries to share, warning the rabbit when storms were coming. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows. Clara told how the fox and rabbit learned each other's languages, how they built snow shelters together, how they discovered that different didn't mean dangerous. One cold night, Clara said, her voice dropping to draw Lily in. A terrible blizzard came. The rabbit's burrow flooded with snow, and she had nowhere to go. She was afraid to ask the fox for help. What if the fox remembered she was supposed to be prey? Lily's eyes were wide. But she asked anyway. She had to. Sometimes needing help is stronger than fear. Clara glanced at Elias, finding him leaning forward slightly. The fox didn't hesitate. She brought the rabbit to her den, shared her warmth, her food, her safety, and as they huddled together, listening to the wind howl, the rabbit realized something important. What? Lily breathed. That family isn't always the one you're born to. Sometimes it's the one that opens the door when you have nowhere else to go. The words hung heavy in the air. Clara hadn't meant for the story to cut so close to truth, but stories had a way of telling themselves. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Like how Papa opened the door for you." Clara's cheeks warmed. "Yes, something like that. And now you open doors for me." Lily continued with 6-year-old logic. "When I have bad dreams, you open your door. When I'm sad, you open the story door." "Oh, sweetheart." Lily climbed into Clara's lap, something she'd never done before. Clara's arms came around her automatically, and she felt the child's small body relax against her. The fox was lucky. Lily mumbled into Clara's shoulder. Even if she lost her first family. Clara met Elias's gaze over his daughter's head. His expression was raw, vulnerable, a man watching his child heal in ways he hadn't dared hope for. "Time for bed," Clara said gently when Lily's weight grew heavy with approaching sleep. "Will you tuck me in, both of you?" Clara looked to Elias questioningly. He stood, setting aside whatever had kept him distant all these weeks. "Of course," he said quietly. They climbed the stairs together, Lily between them, chattering sleepily about foxes and rabbits. In her room, Clara helped her into her nightgown while Elias turned down the quilts. "Papa," Lily said as they tucked her in, "are you happy Miss Clara came?" Elias stilled. Clara held her breath. "Yes," he said finally, his voice rough. "Very happy." "Good." Lily snuggled into her pillow. "The fox needs to know she's wanted. That's important for foxes who got lost." Clara's eyes burned. She bent to kiss Lily's forehead, unable to speak. "Sweet dreams, little one," Elias murmured, smoothing his daughter's hair. They left together, pulling the door almost closed. In the hallway, they stood awkwardly, unsure how to navigate this shift in their careful boundaries. "She's never asked me to tuck her in," Elias said finally. "Not since Margaret." "She's ready to let people close again. Thanks to you." He studied her face in the dim light. "That story tonight. I didn't mean—" "I know." He paused, seeming to wrestle with words. "But it was true. Wasn't it about opening doors when someone has nowhere to go?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "I'm glad I opened mine," he said simply. Then, before she could respond, he retreated to his room. Clara stood alone in the hallway, heart pounding. Something had shifted tonight. Some invisible barrier had cracked. She thought of the fox and rabbit in her story, learning trust one shared berry at a time. Downstairs, she banked the fires and tidied the kitchen, her mind churning. 3 weeks she'd been here. 3 weeks of careful distance, proper boundaries, employment, and nothing more. But tonight Lily had climbed into her lap, Tonight, Elias had said he was glad. Tonight, the story had told more truth than fiction. Clara retrieved her savings pouch from behind the flour bin, counting the coins by lamplight. $16 now. Every week brought her closer to having enough for train fare, closer to leaving. The money felt heavier than before. She thought of Lily's small hand in hers at the market, of Ruth Garrett's unexpected kindness, of Elias humming in his room. Such small things, but they were weaving themselves into her days like thread through fabric. A sound from upstairs made her pause, footsteps pacing. Elias, walking the halls as Lily had said he did. Clara understood that restlessness, the way grief could ambush you just when you thought you were managing. Before she could think better of it, she heated milk and added honey and a precious pinch of nutmeg. Margaret's recipe box had noted it as Elias's favorite when he can't sleep. She climbed the stairs quietly, following the sound of pacing to the parlor. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the stars. "I thought this might help," Clara said softly, offering the cup. He turned, surprised. "You didn't have to." "I know." He accepted the warm milk, inhaling the nutmeg. "Margaret used to make this." "I know. Her recipe box is very thorough." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. That was Margaret, thorough about everything. He sipped the milk, then said quietly, "I still expect to see her sometimes. Turn a corner and there she'll be, laughing at something Lily did. Then I remember." "How long were you married?" 8 years. I was sheriff in Carson City when we met. She was governess for a judge's children, too educated for the likes of me. Everyone said, but she chose me anyway." His voice carried wonder, as if he still couldn't quite believe it. "We came here for a fresh start, built this house together, nail by nail." "It's a good house," Clara offered. "It's too quiet." He moved to sit in his chair, gesturing for Clara to take the rocker. "Even with you and Lily filling it up again. Sometimes the quiet gets so loud I can't think." Clara understood. The absence of someone could take up more space than their presence ever had. "Tell me about your family," Elias said suddenly, "before the fever." Clara rarely spoke of them, but something about the late hour and warm milk made the words come easier. "We had a small farm in Ohio. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Papa raised horses, he had a gift with them. Mama kept chickens, grew vegetables, made the best preserves in the county." She smiled at the memory. "Samuel wanted to be a soldier, used to march around with a stick for a rifle, protecting us from imaginary threats. Rebecca was quieter. She'd sit for hours with the barn cats, making up conversations between them. Sounds like Lily." "A little. She had that same way of seeing magic in ordinary things." Clara's throat tightened. "The fever took Papa first. We thought the rest of us might be spared, but Samuel went next, then Rebecca. Mama held on just long enough to see them buried proper. Then she was gone too." "I'm sorry. It was 2 years ago. Sometimes feels like yesterday, sometimes like a lifetime." She stood, suddenly needing distance from the memories. "I should go. Clara." Her name stopped her at the door. "The story tonight about family being the ones who open doors. Do you believe that?" She turned back, finding him watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "I'm starting to," she admitted. Something passed between them in the lamplight. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of kindred damage. Then Clara slipped away, leaving him to his thoughts and warm milk. In her room, she lay wakeful despite the late hour. Through the wall, she could hear Elias moving about, getting ready for bed, such intimate knowledge for an employee to have the sound of her employer's nighttime routine. But she wasn't really just an employee anymore. Was she? Lily had made that clear tonight. Somewhere between the station platform and now, she'd become part of their lives in ways that couldn't be defined by wages and work. The thought should have frightened her. She'd come here with nothing, planning to leave as soon as possible, Getting attached would only make leaving harder. But as sleep finally claimed her, Clara found herself thinking about the fox in tomorrow's story. Perhaps the fox would decide that getting lost wasn't always a tragedy. Sometimes it was just a different way of finding where you belonged. The money in her pouch could wait. Lily needed more stories. Elias needed help remembering how to smile. And Clara, well, maybe what Clara needed was exactly what she'd found, a place where her presence mattered, where the work of her hands and heart made a difference. She'd been prepared for a job. She hadn't been prepared for the way a child's trust could heal your own wounds. She hadn't expected how a stern man's rare smile could warm you better than any fire. Most of all, she hadn't expected to find pieces of herself she'd thought the fever had taken the part that told stories, that made homes from houses, that dared to hope for more than mere survival. The fox had found more than shelter in her new den. She'd found a reason to stay. Clara drifted towards sleep, already planning tomorrow's bread and what adventure the fox might have next. Outside, snow began to fall again, but the house was warm and full of sleeping souls who'd somehow become hers to care for. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but increasingly, Clara wondered if the life you planned was never as rich as the one that found you when you weren't looking. The days had found their rhythm. Clara rose before dawn. Lily helped with breakfast. Elias left for work with a quiet thank you that had become precious in its consistency. But this particular evening brought a change to their routine. Elias had been called away to investigate trouble at a ranch outside town cattle theft. He'd explained tersely before riding out. Clara and Lily ate supper alone. The sheriff's empty chair, a reminder of how accustomed they'd grown to his presence. "Will Papa be safe?" Lily asked, pushing peas around her plate. "Your father knows his job," Clara assured her. "He'll be careful." They retired to the parlor after dishes, but the nightly story felt incomplete without Elias at his desk. Clara had just reached the part where the fox discovered a hidden meadow when they heard horses outside. Lily ran to the window. "Papa's back, and he brought someone." Clara joined her, peering through the frost-etched glass. Elias was helping a younger man from the saddle, a ranch hand, by his clothing, holding his arm awkwardly against his chest. "Let's give them space," Clara said, but Elias was already at the door. "Clara, I need your help." His voice carried an urgency she hadn't heard before. "Tom here got hurt in the scuffle. Doc Morrison's out at the Hendricks place, won't be back till tomorrow." The injured man, barely more than a boy, swayed on his feet. Clara recognized the pallor of pain and shock. "Bring him to the kitchen," she said, already moving. "Lily, fetch the medical box from the pantry. You know the one." They settled Tom in a chair while Clara examined his arm. Dislocated shoulder, she'd seen it before when her father's horses threw riders. "This is going to hurt," she warned, meeting the young man's frightened eyes. "But it'll hurt worse if we leave it." "Just do it, ma'am," Tom gritted out. Clara positioned herself, remembering her father's teachings. One swift movement, a cry of pain, and the joint slipped back into place. Tom sagged with relief. "There," Clara said, fashioning a sling from clean cloth. "Keep it still for a few days. Willow bark tea for the pain." "You've done this before," Elias observed, watching her work with surprise. "Farm life teaches you many things." Clara turned to Lily, who'd been watching wide-eyed. "You did well. Fetching the supplies? Why don't you get Tom a cup of water?" As Lily scurried off, Tom found his voice. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry to trouble you." "No trouble," Clara assured him, then looked to Elias. "What happened?" "Rustlers hit the Patterson spread. We caught them, but not before they put up a fight." Elias touched a bruise darkening on his own jaw. "Tom here rode for help. Probably saved Patterson's whole herd." Pride flickered across the young man's face. Clara smiled, preparing the willow bark tea. "Then you're a hero, Mr. Tom. Heroes deserve proper tending." As she worked, Lily returned with water, staying close to Clara's side. The child watched everything intently, how Clara's hands moved with careful confidence, how she spoke soothingly to keep Tom calm, how she cleaned and bandaged the scrapes from his fall. "You're like Doc Morrison," Lily announced. "Only nicer. He always looks grumpy." Tom chuckled despite his pain. "She's right about that. Doc's got hands like a blacksmith." They sent Tom on his way with willow bark for the pain and instructions for care. As the door closed behind him, Elias turned to Clara with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My father. He said a woman alone needed to know healing as much as cooking." Clara busied herself cleaning up, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "It's nothing special." "It's not nothing." He caught her wrist gently, stilling her movements. Tom would have suffered all night without help. Clara looked down at his hand on her wrist the first time he'd touched her deliberately. His fingers were warm, calloused from years of work. "Anyone would have helped," she said softly. "No," Lily piped up from where she was putting away supplies. "Mrs. Olson would have said wait for the doctor. Mrs. Henley would have fainted, but you just fixed him." Elias released Clara's wrist, but the warmth lingered. "She's right. You didn't hesitate." On the farm, hesitation could mean death. A horse with colic, a cow with a breached calf, you learned to act or you lost everything. Clara met his eyes. "I suppose some lessons stay with you." Something shifted in his expression, respect deepening into something warmer. "We were lucky you came to us, Clara Whitfield." Lily tugged at Clara's skirt. "Can we finish the fox story now? She was just finding the meadow." They returned to the parlor, but the atmosphere had changed. Elias didn't pretend to work at his desk. Instead, he sat in the chair across from them, listening openly as Clara picked up the tale. The meadow was hidden behind a waterfall. Clara continued, aware of Elias's gaze. The fox had to be very brave to go through the rushing water. As she wove the story, Clara felt a new awareness of Elias's presence, of the way lamplight caught in his dark hair, of how his face softened when Lily laughed at the fox's antics. When had she begun noticing such things? The story finished with the fox discovering the meadow was full of healing herbs that could help sick animals. Lily clapped her hands, delighted. "Like Miss Clara," she exclaimed. "The fox is learning to heal too." "Time for bed, little healer," Clara said, rising from the rocking chair. "Can Papa tuck me in again with you?" Clara glanced at Elias, who nodded. This had become their new routine, both of them seeing Lily to bed, a ritual that felt dangerously like what a real family might do. Upstairs, as they settled Lily under her quilts, the child had a request. "Papa, will you tell part of tomorrow's story?" Elias looked startled. "I don't know stories like Miss Clara does." "You could tell about being sheriff, about catching bad men and saving cattle. Those aren't proper bedtime stories." "Please," Lily deployed her most persuasive expression. Elias glanced helplessly at Clara, who hid a smile. "Perhaps just a small adventure," she suggested. "Something with a happy ending." "Well," Elias sat on the edge of the bed, clearly out of his element. "There was once a very clever horse named Buttercup." Clara watched, enchanted, as he spun a simple tale about a horse who helped catch bandits by learning to untie knots. His delivery lacked her practiced smoothness, but Lily hung on every word, thrilled to have her father sharing stories. When they left Lily's room, Elias looked sheepish. "That was harder than facing down rustlers." "You did wonderfully. She'll remember that story forever." They paused in the hallway, that increasingly familiar moment of not quite wanting to part. The lamp cast warm shadows, creating an intimate circle in the darkness. "Clara," Elias began, then stopped. "I thank you for tonight, for Tom, for Lily, for everything." "It's what I'm here for," Clara said, though the words felt hollow. She wasn't here just as hired help anymore, and they both knew it. "Is it?" His voice dropped lower. Is that all? The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory, the kind that led to complications, attachments, reasons to stay when she should go. Elias, she used his given name without thinking, saw how it affected him. He stepped closer, and she could smell the leather and pine soap scent of him, could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. For a moment, she thought he might... Papa, Lily's voice drifted from her room. I forgot to say something. The spell broke. They stepped apart, both breathing a little too quickly. I should, Clara gestured toward the stairs. Yes, of course. Elias ran a hand through his hair, looking as shaken as she felt. Clara fled downstairs, her skin still tingling from his nearness. She busied herself with unnecessary tasks, banking the fire, wiping already clean counters, anything to calm her racing pulse. What was happening to her careful plans? She was supposed to be saving money, planning her escape, keeping her heart safely locked away. Instead, she was teaching a child to heal, sharing late-night conversations with her employer, feeling things she had no business feeling. She retrieved her savings pouch, counting the coins as if they could anchor her to reality. $24 now. More than enough for a ticket somewhere, if not all the way to Chicago. She could leave next week, start fresh in another town where no one knew her story. The thought made her stomach clench with something that felt treacherously like grief. Footsteps on the stairs made her quickly hide the pouch. Elias appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking uncertain. Lily wanted me to tell you she loves you, he said quietly. She's never said that to anyone but Margaret and me. Clara's eyes burned. Oh, I thought you should know. He hesitated, then added, It scares me sometimes, how quickly she's attached to you. What happens when I leave? Clara finished. Yes. They stared at each other across the kitchen, both acknowledging the future pain they were creating with each passing day. I won't leave without preparing her. Clara promised. I won't just disappear. I know. Elias leaned against the doorframe, looking tired. You're not that kind of person. If you were, you wouldn't have fixed Tom's shoulder or taught Lily to be brave or made me remember how to tell stories. You never forgot. You just needed reminding. He smiled then, sad and sweet. See? That's what I mean. You see the best in people, even when they can't see it themselves. Elias. I know this wasn't what you planned, he continued. I know you came here expecting one life and got another, but I need you to know we're grateful. I'm grateful, however long you stay. He left before she could respond, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, heart aching with unnamed longings. She thought about the fox in her stories, how she'd found an unexpected home, unexpected friends, unexpected purpose. Life had a way of ignoring your careful plans, of offering gifts disguised as disasters. $24 toward a future somewhere else, but also a child who loved her, a man who looked at her like she was precious, a home that felt more real than any she'd imagined with the fictional James Morrison. Clara touched her wrist where Elias's fingers had been, still feeling their warmth. Tomorrow she'd rise early, make breakfast, tend to Lily, keep house. She'd add another $1 to her escape fund, another day closer to leaving. But tonight, she allowed herself to imagine staying, imagined more evenings of shared stories, more moments in lamplit hallways, more of Lily's laughter and Elias's rare smiles, imagined seasons changing while she remained, watching Lily grow, watching Elias heal, watching herself become someone she'd never expected to be. Dangerous thoughts for a woman with $24 and a heart that should know better. But as Clara climbed the stairs to her borrowed room, she found herself humming the same tuneless melody Elias hummed when he thought no one could hear. The sound of happiness trying to remember itself, of hope taking root despite all sense and reason. The fox had found more than a meadow behind that waterfall. She'd found a place where her particular gifts, her courage, her cleverness, her care were exactly what was needed. Maybe that's what home really was, not a place you planned to be, but a place that needed you to be exactly who you were. The thought followed Clara into sleep, warm and dangerous as a banked fire, ready to burst into flame at the slightest breath of encouragement. The fabric shop stood on Main Street between the barber and the land office, its windows displaying bolts of calico and gingham. Clara had avoided it since arriving in Frost Hollow, knowing the proprietress, Mrs. Blackwood's reputation for gossip. But Lily had outgrown her winter dress, and Clara's sewing skills demanded supplies. "Stay close," Clara murmured as they entered, the bell above the door announcing their arrival with sharp clarity. "Mrs." Blackwood looked up from her ledger, her pinched face registering first surprise, then something colder. She was a woman of 50, wearing respectability like armor, her dress severe and her hair pulled tight enough to stretch her features. "May I help you?" The words dripped ice. "We need fabric for a child's dress," Clara said evenly. "Something warm, and thread to match." "Mrs." Blackwood's gaze swept over Clara's appearance, Margaret's altered dress marking her as hired help, her bare ring finger announcing her status. The shopkeeper's lips pursed as if tasting something sour. "I'm not certain we have anything suitable," she said, though shelves of fabric clearly lined the walls. "The blue one," Lily piped up, pointing to a bolt of wool the color of winter sky. "It's pretty like Miss Clara's eyes." An uncomfortable silence fell. "Mrs." Blackwood's jaw tightened. "That fabric is quite dear, perhaps something more appropriate to your circumstances." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "We'll take 3 yards of the blue, please, and white cotton for a new nightgown." "I really don't think—" "The sheriff's accounts are good here, aren't they?" Clara interrupted quietly. "He mentioned you've supplied his household for years." "Mrs." Blackwood's face went rigid. Other customers had entered Mrs. Henley from the hotel and another woman Clara didn't recognize. They pretended to examine ribbons while obviously eavesdropping. "Are you threatening me, Mrs.?" Blackwood hissed. "I'm attempting to purchase fabric for a child who needs a dress." Clara met her gaze steadily. "Nothing more." "How dare you come in here, flaunting your situation?" The shopkeeper's voice rose, drawing more attention. "We all know what you are. Arriving in a wedding dress with no husband, moving into the sheriff's house within days." "She helps us." Lily's voice cut through the venom, high and clear. "Miss Clara makes breakfast and tells stories and fixed Tom's hurt arm and—" "Lily, hush," Clara said gently, though her heart swelled at the child's defense. "Corrupting an innocent child." Mrs. Blackwood continued, warming to her theme. "Have you no shame, no decency?" The other women drew closer, vultures scenting blood. Clara felt Lily press against her side, trembling with confusion and growing distress. "She's not bad," Lily insisted, tears starting. "She's good, she's—" "That's enough." The deep voice came from the doorway. Elias stood there, his presence filling the space with authority. His gaze swept the scene, Clara standing straight despite her humiliation. Lily clinging to her skirts, the circle of condemning faces. "Sheriff." "Mrs." Blackwood stammered. "I was just—" "I heard what you were doing." His voice carried the kind of quiet that preceded storms. "Miss Whitfield is employed in my household. She cares for my daughter with kindness and competence. Any insult to her is an insult to me. Surely you can't expect us to pretend that this arrangement is proper." "Mrs." Henley ventured. Elias turned his gray eyes on her, and she stepped back. "I expect you to treat my employees with basic courtesy, the same courtesy you'd show anyone trying to purchase goods in this town." "But she was deceived by a criminal, arrived here expecting marriage and found betrayal instead." His voice hardened further. Would you prefer she had frozen to death on the platform? Would that have satisfied your sense of propriety? Silence fell like a hammer. Mrs. Blackwood. Elias continued. Miss Whitfield requested fabric. I trust you'll fill her order promptly. The shopkeeper's hands shook as she measured and cut, wrapping the purchases in brown paper with jerky movements. Clara paid with the household money, aware of every eye upon her. Furthermore, Elias said as Clara gathered the packages, if I hear of anyone in this town treating Miss Whitfield or my daughter with disrespect, they'll answer to me. Not as a private citizen, but as the sheriff. Is that understood? Muttered agreement rippled through the shop. Good. He stepped aside to let Clara and Lily pass. Ladies. Outside, Clara's legs trembled with delayed reaction. She'd faced judgment before, but never such public viciousness. Never in front of Lily. Why were they so mean? Lily asked, voice small. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people are frightened of what they don't understand. Clara managed. I'm not frightened of you, Lily said fiercely. I love you. Clara's eyes burned. Before she could respond, Elias spoke. Wait here. He strode back into the shop, emerging moments later with something in his hand, a length of yellow ribbon, bright as sunshine. For your hair, he told Lily gruffly, to match your new dress when Miss Clara makes it. Lily beamed, her distress forgotten in childish delight. But Clara saw deeper, saw a father trying to ease his daughter's pain, trying to create beauty from ugliness. They walked home in silence, Lily skipping ahead with her ribbon. Clara was acutely aware of Elias beside her, of what his public defense had cost him. You didn't have to do that, she said finally. Yes, I did. It will make things harder for you. The town can hang. The vehemence in his voice surprised her. They had no right to speak to you that way, especially in front of Lily. They're not entirely wrong, though my presence in your house, it does look... Elias stopped walking, turning to face her. Clara, you've brought light back into my home. Lily smiles again. She laughs. She's learning to live without her mother because you're teaching her how. I won't let anyone make you feel ashamed of that. But your reputation. My reputation, he laughed bitterly. I'm the sheriff who couldn't save his own wife from consumption, who let his daughter sink into silence because he didn't know how to reach her. What reputation do I have worth protecting? You're a good man, Clara said firmly. A good father. The town respects you. Then they'll respect my choices. His jaw set stubbornly. Or they'll find themselves a new sheriff come election time. The weight of what he was risking settled over Clara like snow. His position, his standing, his future all balanced against defending a woman he'd known barely a month. Why? She whispered. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was rough with suppressed emotion. Because you see us, not the sheriff and the motherless child, but Elias and Lily. Because you came to us broken but still gave everything you had to give. Because... He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Because I can't stand to see you hurt, not by anyone, not for any reason. Clara's heart pounded so hard she was sure he must hear it. Elias. I know, he said quickly. I know this complicates things. I know you're planning to leave when you have the money. I'm not asking for anything. I needed you to know that you matter. To us. To me. Lily's voice floated back to them, singing something about yellow ribbons and blue dresses. The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious. You matter to me too, Clara admitted, the words barely audible. Both of you, more than I should let you. Something flared in his eyes, hope, perhaps, or recognition. But before either could speak further, Lily came running back. Hurry, I want to help make my dress. The spell broke, but gently. They continued home, the packages rustling in Clara's arms. She thought about Mrs. Blackwood's cruel words. how they'd stung despite her attempts at dignity. But she also thought about Elias's fierce protection, Lily's loyal love, the yellow ribbon bright with promise. That evening, as Clara cut out patterned pieces while Lily practiced her letters, Elias sat closer than usual, not touching, not pushing boundaries, just near. His presence felt like armor against the memory of the shop's hostility. "Will they always hate me?" Clara asked quietly after Lily had gone to bed. "Hate's too strong," Elias said thoughtfully. "They're scared. A woman alone who doesn't follow their rules, doesn't crumble under their judgment that threatens everything they've been taught to believe. And you, doesn't it threaten you?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara felt exposed in ways that had nothing to do with her unmarried state. "No," he said simply. "It makes me hope for things I thought were buried with Margaret. That terrifies me more than any town gossip ever could." Clara's hand stilled on the fabric. "What kind of things?" "The kind that involve yellow ribbons and blue dresses and stories by the fire for years to come." The words hung between them, a bridge she could cross or retreat from. Clara thought of her hidden savings, of trains heading east, of fresh starts in cities where no one knew her shame. Then she thought of Lily's laugh, of Elias's rare smiles, of the home they were building together stitch by careful stitch. "I'm good at sewing," she said finally, voice trembling only slightly. "Making new things from old patterns. Maybe I could learn to be good at staying too." Elias's hand covered hers on the table, warm and steady and sure. "You already are. We just need to convince you of it." Clara turned her palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. It was improper, scandalous even. But after today, she found she cared less about the town's opinion and more about the feeling of being chosen, defended, valued. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, misses. Blackwood would spread her poison. Other shops might close their doors. The weight of judgment would press heavier. But tonight, Clara had fabric for a dress, a ribbon for a little girl's hair, and a man's hand holding hers like she was something precious. The fox had faced the wolves and survived, not through running or hiding, but through finding her pack the ones who would stand with her when the howling grew too loud. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd dreamed of. It was better, it was real. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by the postal clerk who couldn't quite meet Clara's eyes as he handed it over. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Her cousin Martha from Chicago. The neat loops and careful letters speaking of education and propriety. Clara tucked it into her apron pocket, finishing breakfast preparations before allowing herself to retreat to the pantry to read. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. Asterisk, dearest Clara. Asterisk word has reached us of your circumstances. While I cannot condone the choices that led you to your current situation, blood is blood. Herbert and I have discussed the matter, and we are prepared to offer you a position in our household. The work would be respectable, caring for our 3 children and helping with social occasions. The pay is modest, but would include a proper room and the chance to rebuild your reputation in a city where your past need not follow. Asterisk, we expect an answer by month's end. A train ticket is enclosed. Do not squander this opportunity for redemption. Asterisk, your cousin. Asterisk, Martha asterisk. Clara stared at the words, their careful condescension cutting deeper than outright cruelty might have. A train ticket fell from the envelope her escape made tangible. Everything she'd been saving for handed to her like charity. "Miss Clara," Lily's voice called from the kitchen. "The porridge is bubbling." Clara quickly tucked the letter away and hurried back to salvage breakfast, but her mind churned as she stirred the pot, as she set the table, as she watched Elias and Lily eat their morning meal. "You're quiet," Elias observed, his keen eyes studying her face. "Just wool gathering," Clara managed, forcing a smile. He didn't press, but she felt his concern throughout the meal. After he left for work and Lily was settled with her lessons, Clara retrieved the letter, reading it again as if the words might have changed. Chicago, A real city with opportunities, anonymity, the chance to start over without the weight of her failed mail-order marriage. The position would be respectable. Her past could be buried. She could become someone new. So why did the thought make her feel like she was suffocating? That evening, Clara was distracted during story time. The little fox's adventures felt hollow when she herself faced such a crossroads. Lily noticed. Of course, children always did. "Is the fox sad tonight?" she asked, curling closer to Clara's side. "Perhaps a little," Clara admitted. Why? Clara searched for words a child could understand. Sometimes the fox remembers her first forest and wonders if she should have tried harder to get back to it. But she has a new forest now, Lily said with 6-year-old certainty, with the rabbit and the owl and the meadow. Why would she go back? From his desk, Elias had gone very still. Sometimes grown-ups think they should want things they don't really want, Clara said carefully, because it seems like the proper thing to do. That's silly, Lily declared. The fox should stay where she's happy. If only life were that simple, Clara thought, but she smiled and continued the story, aware of Elias's eyes on her throughout. After Lily was in bed, Clara found herself alone with Elias in the parlor. She should go to her room. The letter seemed to burn in her pocket, making her feel guilty for this comfortable domesticity. But when she rose to leave, he spoke. Something came today, in the post. It wasn't a question. Clara sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. My cousin in Chicago. She's offered me a position. Elias absorbed this, his face carefully neutral. A good position. Respectable. Caring for her children. A chance to start over where no one knows about. About Morrison. I see. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, when would you go? She wants an answer by month's end. That's 2 weeks. Yes. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Clara wanted to explain how the offer felt like a cage disguised as freedom, how Chicago seemed gray and distant compared to this warmth, how leaving would tear something in her that had just begun to heal. But the words tangled in her throat. You should take it, Elias said suddenly, his voice rough. It's a good opportunity, better than here, where you face judgment every day. Clara's heart sank. You think I should go? I think... He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. I think I have no right to ask you to stay. You came here expecting marriage, security, a future. Instead, you got servitude and scandal. Your cousin offers escape from that. Is that what you think this is, servitude? He turned, and she saw anguish in his eyes. Isn't it you cook our meals, tend our home, raise my child, weather the town's contempt all for $2 a week in a room with a separate entrance? What kind of life is that? The kind where I'm needed, Clara said quietly. The kind where a little girl calls me Lala when she's tired and a man trusts me with his daughter's heart. The kind where I wake up with purpose instead of mere survival. Clara, my cousin offers me respectability at the cost of being forever grateful, forever less than, forever the poor relation taken in out of duty. She stood, moving toward him. Here, I may be the fallen woman, the failed bride, but I'm also the woman who tells stories and heals hurts and makes a house feel like home again. The town. The town can hang? She said, echoing his own words from the fabric shop. When did I start caring more about their opinion than about what's real? And what's real? His voice was barely a whisper. Clara took a breath, gathering courage she didn't know she possessed. This, us. The three of us building something from the ashes of what we lost. That's real. Elias crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. If you stay, I can't promise it will be easy. The town may never accept you. I can't offer you wealth or comfort or even my name not yet. Not while you're under my roof. It wouldn't be proper. I've had quite enough of proper, Clara said, her voice shaking. I'd rather have real... He kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of promises neither could voice yet. Clara melted into it, feeling like she was coming home after a long, cold journey. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, she saw wonder in his eyes. "You'll stay, if you'll have me, not as your housekeeper, not as hired help, but as whatever we're becoming." "Clara," her name was a prayer on his lips. "We're becoming a family. We have been since the night you told Lily that first story." Tears blurred her vision. "I should write to Martha." "Tomorrow," he said, pulling her close again. "Tonight, just let me believe you're staying." They stood holding each other in the firelight, two souls who'd found each other through loss and lies and unexpected grace. Outside, spring was coming to Frost Hollow. Clara could smell it in the changing wind, see it in the way ice loosened its grip on the eaves. "Elias," she said against his chest. "The fox isn't going back to her old forest." She felt him smile into her hair. "Good. The rabbit and the owl would miss her terribly." Just the rabbit and the owl. He pulled back to look at her, and the tenderness in his expression stole her breath. No, the whole forest would grow dark without her. Later, alone in her room, Clara took out paper and pen. The letter to Martha was brief but polite, thanking her for the offer but declining. She sealed it along with the unused train ticket, feeling lighter with each fold of paper. Then she wrote another letter, this one to the marriage broker in Cincinnati. Not seeking recompense or justice, she knew such things were unlikely, but she wanted him to know that his deception, cruel as it was, had led her to something real, that the life built on lies had crumbled only to reveal a stronger foundation beneath. She probably wouldn't send it, but writing it felt like closing a door, like choosing her future instead of letting it choose her. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Clara," Lily's voice, thin with night fears. "Come in, sweetheart." The child padded in, clutching her mother's old quilt. "I had a dream you went away, like Mama." Clara opened her arms, and Lily crawled into them without hesitation. "I'm not going anywhere." "Promise." "I promise. The fox has found her home." Lily relaxed against her, small body warming with relief. "Good, because Papa smiled at supper. Real smiles, not the pretend ones. And you had stars in your eyes when you looked at him." "Out of the mouths of babes," Clara thought, stroking the child's hair. "Did I?" "Mm-hmm. Like in the stories when the princess finds her prince. Only better because it's real." Clara held the little girl close, marveling at the wisdom of innocence. Yes, it was better because it was real, messy and complicated and without guarantees, but real in all the ways that mattered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The town would talk. Martha would be scandalized. Proper society would shake its head at her choices. But tonight, Clara had a child in her arms and a man's promise in her heart, and that was worth more than all the respectability in Chicago. The fox had found her den, and no amount of howling from the outside world could drive her from it now. She was home, truly home, in all the ways that mattered. Spring was coming to Frost Hollow, and with it, the chance for new growth. Clara smiled into the darkness, feeling the season change not just in the air but in her very bones. The winter of her discontent was ending. It was time to bloom where she'd been planted, scandal and all. The fever came on suddenly. One moment Lily was helping Clara with the washing. The next she was swaying on her feet, her face flushed with unnatural heat. "My head hurts," she whimpered, and Clara's heart clenched at the familiar words. How many times had she heard them from Samuel, from Rebecca, before the fever took them? "Let's get you to bed, sweetheart." Clara kept her voice calm despite the fear clawing at her throat. She carried Lily upstairs, the child's body burning against her chest. By the time Elias returned home, Lily was delirious, tossing in her bed and calling for her mother. Clara had been sponging her with cool water for hours, but the fever refused to break. How long? Elias asked tersely, his face gray with terror. Since noon. I've sent Mrs. Olson for Doc Morrison, but he's still at the Henderson Ranch. Won't be back until tomorrow. Elias gripped the doorframe, knuckles white. Dear God, not her too, not Lily. Clara had never seen him so undone. The strong, steady sheriff was just a frightened father watching his worst nightmare unfold. She's strong, Clara said firmly. And she's not alone. We'll fight this. Margaret was strong too, he said brokenly. It didn't matter. This isn't consumption. It's just a fever. Children get them. But Clara heard the doubt in her own voice. She'd said the same about her siblings. The night stretched endlessly. Clara never left Lily's side, alternating between cooling cloths and spoonfuls of willow bark tea when the child could swallow. Elias paced the hallway like a caged animal, occasionally entering to touch his daughter's burning forehead, his face a mask of anguish. Papa? Lily's voice, cracked and small, cut through the darkness near dawn. Elias was at her side instantly. I'm here, baby. Papa's here. Where's Mama? I want Mama. Her glassy eyes searched the room without recognition. Clara saw Elias crumble. She's... I'm here, Clara said softly, taking Lily's hand. I'm right here, darling. Lily turned toward her voice, confusion flickering across her fevered features. Mama! Clara met Elias's tortured gaze over the child's head. He nodded slightly, tears streaming down his face. Yes, sweetheart, Clara whispered. Mama's here. You're safe. Tell me about the fox. Lily mumbled. The story where she finds her family. So Clara told stories through the endless day, her voice growing hoarse. She told of brave foxes and loyal rabbits, of meadows that bloomed in spring and dens that weathered every storm. When her voice failed, she hummed lullabies her mother had sung, melodies that seemed to calm Lily's restless tossing. Elias never left the room. He held his daughter's other hand, his lips moving in what Clara recognized as prayer. She'd never seen him pray before, this man who'd lost his faith when he lost his wife. But here he was, bargaining with a God he'd turned from, offering anything, everything for his child's life. The second night was worse. Lily's breathing grew labored, rattling in her small chest. The sound transported Clara back to another sick room, another child fighting for breath. Rebecca's face seemed to overlay Lily's, and for a moment Clara couldn't tell which child she was losing. No, she said fiercely, shaking off the memory. Not this time, not her. She redoubled her efforts, cooling baths, herb teas, constant vigilance. When Lily coughed, Clara held her upright to ease her breathing. When she cried out in delirium, Clara sang. When she called for her mother, Clara answered. You can't, Elias said brokenly during one of Lily's quieter moments. You can't promise her you're Margaret. When she wakes, if she wakes. Then we'll deal with that. Clara said, right now, she needs comfort more than truth. What if she doesn't wake? What if the last thing I do is lie to her? Clara reached across the bed, gripping his hand. The last thing you'll do is love her. That's not a lie. Doc Morrison finally arrived near midnight of the second day, exhausted from his long ride. He examined Lily with gentle hands, his face grave. The fever's too high, he said quietly. If it doesn't break soon. Tell me what to do, Clara demanded. You're doing all that can be done. Keep her cool, get fluids in her if possible, and pray. I don't know how anymore. Elias confessed. The doctor looked at him with compassion. Then let others pray for you. The whole town knows by now. Even Mrs. Blackwood was asking after the child. After he left, promising to return at dawn. Clara and Elias resumed their vigil. The house felt suspended in time, holding its breath along with its occupants. I can't lose her, Elias said into the darkness. She's all I have left of Margaret. No, Clara said firmly. She's not all you have. And she's not just Margaret's daughter. She's yours. She has your strength, your stubbornness. She won't give up. How are you so certain? Because I've seen the other side of this. I've watched children slip away. Lily isn't slipping, she's fighting. Listen to her breathing. Still strong, still determined. Clara squeezed his hand. She's her father's daughter. The third dawn was breaking. Pale light creeping through the windows. When Clara felt it, the subtle shift in the air, the change in Lily's breathing. She pressed her hand to the child's forehead, hardly daring to hope. "Elias," her voice shook. "The fever's breaking." He jerked awake from where he'd been dozing in the chair, immediately reaching for his daughter. Wonder dawned on his haggard face as he felt her cooler skin. "Lily, baby, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, clear eyes. "Seeing eyes? Papa, why are you crying?" Elias let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, gathering her into his arms. "Because I'm happy, sweetheart, so happy." Clara rose on trembling legs, intending to give them privacy, but Lily reached for her. "Lala, you stayed." "Of course I stayed." Clara sank back onto the bed, accepting the child's weak embrace. "I promised, didn't I?" "You sang Mama's songs," Lily said drowsily. "I heard them in my dreams." Over her head. Clara met Elias's eyes. The gratitude there was overwhelming, but beneath it was something deeper recognition of what these 3 days had revealed. They were no longer playing at being a family. Somewhere between the prayers and the songs and the sleepless nights, they had become one. "Rest now," Clara murmured, stroking Lily's damp hair. "We'll be here when you wake." As the child drifted into healing sleep, Elias reached across to take Clara's hand. "You saved her." "We saved her. Together." "No." His voice was fierce with emotion. "You never gave up. Even when I was falling apart, you stayed strong. You became her mother when she needed one most." "Elias, marry me." The words hung in the dawn-lit room like suspended stars. Clara's heart stopped, then raced. "What?" "I know it's too soon. I know we should wait, court properly, let the town adjust. But Clara, these 3 days showed me what I already knew: you belong with us. Not as our housekeeper, not as some temporary solution, but as my wife and Lily's mother. The town will... I told you before, the town can hang. I almost lost my daughter. Do you think I care what Mrs. Blackwood thinks?" He shifted closer, cupping her face with hands that still trembled from their ordeal. "I love you, Clara Whitfield. I think I've loved you since that first night you told Lily about the fox. Please say yes." Clara thought of all the reasons she should refuse the scandal, the gossip, the impropriety of it all. Then she looked at Lily sleeping peacefully between them, at Elias's face full of hope and exhaustion and love, and knew there was only one answer. "Yes," she whispered. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, careful not to disturb Lily. It tasted of tears and relief and promise. "We'll wait a proper time," he said against her lips. 6 months, maybe. Enough to quiet the worst of the talk. I'll court you properly, flowers and Sunday walks and all of it." Clara smiled through her tears. "I don't need all of that." "But you deserve it. You deserve everything proper and good, even if our beginning was neither." "Our beginning was exactly what it needed to be," Clara said firmly. "It brought me here, to you and Lily. I wouldn't change a moment." Lily stirred between them, mumbling something about foxes and meadows. They both looked down at her, this precious child who'd fought so hard to stay with them. "Mama," she sighed in her sleep, and Clara no longer flinched at the word. "I'm here," she whispered. "Mama's here." Elias pressed his forehead to hers, and they stayed that way as the sun rose fully, bathing the room in golden light. The fever had broken in more ways than one. The long winter of grief was ending for all of them. Doc Morrison found them like that when he returned a tableau of quiet joy. A family forged in crisis and sealed with love. He smiled, checking Lily with gentle hands. "She'll be weak for a few days," he pronounced. "But the worst is past. You've done well." As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. The whole town was praying, even those who, well, a child's illness has a way of putting things in perspective. After he left, Clara wondered if Lily's illness might soften some hearts toward her. But then she realized it didn't matter. She had everything she needed right here in this room, a man who loved her, a child who called her Mama, and a future bright with possibility. The little fox had found more than a den. She'd found souls who would fight for her as fiercely as she fought for them. And that, Clara thought as she watched her family wake to a new day, was worth more than all the respectability in the world. The spring festival had transformed Frost Hollow's main street into a river of color and life. Bunting stretched between buildings. Vendors sold early wildflowers and fresh-baked goods, and the sound of fiddle music drifted on the warm breeze. It was the town's celebration of winter's end, of survival and renewal. Clara adjusted Lily's new blue dress one more time, the fabric they'd bought that terrible day at Mrs. Blackwood's shop now transformed into something beautiful. The yellow ribbon crowned the child's dark braids, bright as the daffodils blooming in window boxes. "Do I look pretty, Mama?" Lily asked, twirling to make her skirt bell out. The word Mama still made Clara's heart squeeze, though Lily had been using it freely since her recovery 2 months ago. "You look perfect, sweetheart." Elias appeared in the doorway, wearing his good suit, the one he'd worn for church and town meetings, and Clara knew, Margaret's funeral. But today his face held no shadows, only a quiet anticipation that made him look younger than his years. "My ladies ready?" he asked, offering an arm to each of them. They walked through town as a family, and Clara noticed the change in how people looked at them. The hostility had softened since Lily's illness. She'd received tentative nods from women who'd previously crossed streets to avoid her, even a mumbled, "Glad the child's well," from Mrs. Henley. Not acceptance, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of it. The festival centered around the small park, where tables groaned under the weight of pies and preserves, where children ran between game booths, where couples danced to the fiddler's tunes. Clara felt Elias's hand tighten on hers as they entered the crowd. "You sure about this?" she murmured. Never been more sure of anything. They made their way through the festivities, Lily darting ahead to play ring toss with other children. Clara watched her go with a mixture of pride and anxiety. It was the first time since her illness that Lily had been allowed such freedom. "She's fine," Elias said, reading her concern. "She's strong, like her mother." Clara knew he meant both mothers, the one who'd given Lily life and the one who'd helped save it. "Sheriff Moore," Mayor Hutchins approached, his politician's smile bright. "Good to see you out with your household." The pause before household was deliberate, but Elias didn't flinch. "Mayor, fine day for the festival." "Indeed, and Miss Whitfield, how lovely you look." The mayor's eyes held calculation. Elections were coming, and the sheriff's unconventional domestic arrangement was a potential complication. "I trust you're finding Frost Hollow accommodating." "More each day," Clara replied evenly. The mayor moved on, but Clara caught the look he gave Elias, a warning. Perhaps about the political costs of scandal. "You could lose the election because of me," Clara said quietly. "Then I'll find other work. I was a rancher before I was a sheriff. I can be one again." Elias drew her toward the dance floor. "Dance with me. People will talk. Let them." They joined the other couples as the fiddler struck up a waltz. Elias was a surprisingly good dancer, leading her through the steps with the same quiet confidence he brought to everything. Clara was aware of eyes upon them, some disapproving, some curious, a few unexpectedly warm. "You're thinking too much," Elias murmured, pulling her closer. "Hard not to when half the town is watching." "Then give them something worth watching." He spun her, And Clara laughed despite herself, her skirts swirling. When he caught her again, his eyes held such tenderness that she forgot about their audience entirely. "I love you," he said, quiet enough that only she could hear. "In front of the whole town. I love you." Before Clara could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A man on horseback had arrived, dust-covered and urgent. He dismounted, scanning the crowd until he spotted Elias. "Sheriff, we got him." Elias tensed. "Morrison?" "Caught him in Denver. Federal marshals are bringing him in on tomorrow's train." The deputy's grin was fierce. "The confidence man who's been swindling women all over the territory. He'll finally face justice." The crowd buzzed with interest. Everyone knew about the mail-order bride schemes, though most had been too polite or too judgmental to discuss it openly. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. James Morrison, the man who'd started it all, whose lies had brought her to that frozen platform. She'd thought she'd made peace with it, but sudden rage flooded through her. "Clara," Elias's hand was on her elbow, steadying her. "I'm all right," she managed, though her voice shook. "No, you're not, and you don't have to be." He turned to the deputy. "Thanks for the news. Tom, we'll discuss it at the office tomorrow." But the damage was done. The festive mood had shifted, whispers rippling through the crowd. The abandoned bride, the woman who'd been fooled, the scandal that wouldn't die. Clara straightened her spine. "I'd like to meet him." "What?" Elias stared at her. "When they bring Morrison in, I want to see him." She met his concerned gaze steadily. "I need to—" Before he could argue, Mayor Hutchins had climbed onto the makeshift stage, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we announce the pie contest winners, I have something to say." Clara's stomach dropped. Was he about to publicly censure them, use their situation to make some political point? But the mayor surprised her. "As you know, our sheriff has served this town with distinction for 8 years. He's kept us safe, upheld the law, and asked for little in return. Even when personal tragedy struck, he never wavered in his duty." Murmurs of agreement rose from the crowd. Elias shifted uncomfortably beside Clara. "Now, I know there's been talk," the mayor continued, his eyes finding Clara in the crowd. "Talk about propriety and scandal and what's fitting for a town like ours. But I'll tell you what I've seen these past months. I've seen a little girl smile again after losing her mother. I've seen a household that was drowning in grief find its way back to shore. And I've seen our sheriff remember what it looks like to be happy." Clara's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Miss Whitfield came to our town under unfortunate circumstances. It's true, but she stayed under admirable ones. She's cared for the Moore family with dedication and grace, asking nothing but fair wages and a chance to prove herself. I think she's proven plenty." The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. "So, before we celebrate spring and renewal and second chances, I want to say this Frost Hollow is big enough for all kinds of families, all kinds of new beginnings. And Sheriff Moore has my full support, both as a lawman and as a man who's found happiness after loss. I hope he has yours too." Scattered applause began, growing stronger as Ruth Garrett and her husband joined in, as Doc Morrison added his approval, as even some of the church ladies nodded reluctantly. "Not everyone misses." Blackwood stood with pursed lips, and others looked uncomfortable but enough, more than enough. Elias stepped forward. "If I might add something, Mayor—" Hutchins gestured him toward the stage. Elias climbed up, reaching back to help Clara join him. She resisted, but his grip was firm, and suddenly she was standing before the entire town. "Most of you know my story." Elias began, his deep voice carrying clearly. "You knew Margaret, mourned with me when she passed. You've watched me struggle to raise Lily alone, watched us both fade a little more each day." He took Clara's hand, lacing their fingers together in full view of everyone. Then Clara arrived, not in the way any of us expected, certainly not in the way she planned, But sometimes the best things in life come disguised as disasters. She's brought light back to my home, laughter back to my daughter, and love back to my heart. Clara couldn't stop the tears now. Didn't try. I'm not a man given to grand gestures or pretty speeches. Elias continued, but I want everyone here to know that I've asked Clara Whitfield to be my wife, and she's said yes. We'll wait a proper time, do things right. But make no mistake, she's not our housekeeper anymore. She's family, and anyone who treats her with less than full respect will answer to me. The silence stretched for a heartbeat. 2. Then Lily's voice piped up from near the stage. Does this mean I get to be in a wedding? Laughter rippled through the crowd, breaking the tension. The applause that followed was more universal, though Clara still spotted holdouts. But as Elias helped her down from the stage, as neighbors offered tentative congratulations, as Ruth Garrett embraced her with tears in her eyes, Clara realized it didn't matter. She'd never have everyone's approval, but she had enough acceptance to build a life, enough support to weather the storms, enough love to make it all worthwhile. Later, as the festival wound down and they walked home through streets painted gold by sunset, Lily between them chattering about wedding dresses and flowers, Clara felt a peace she hadn't known since before her family died. You know, Morrison being caught doesn't change anything, she said to Elias. Not really. I still came here believing a lie, still made a fool of myself. You're wrong, he said firmly. It changes everything. It proves you were a victim, not a fool. It gives you the chance to face him, to show him that his lies led to something better than he ever could have offered. A sheriff who announces our engagement to the whole town. A man who loves you enough to claim you in front of everyone who doubted you. He stopped walking, turning to face her. I meant every word. You saved us. Clara, Lily and me both. Let us save you back. Lily tugged at their joined hands. Can we go home now? I want to tell the Fox about the festival. Home. The words settled around Clara like Margaret's borrowed dresses had not quite fitted at first, but growing more comfortable with each wearing. Yes, she said, smiling at her family, her real, complicated, perfect family. Let's go home. As they walked through the spring evening, Clara thought about the woman who'd stood on that frozen platform months ago, convinced her life was over. How could she have known that getting lost was just another way of finding where you belonged? Tomorrow she would face James Morrison, the architect of her supposed downfall. But tonight she had a child to tuck in, a man to love, and a home that had chosen her as much as she'd chosen it. The little fox had not only found her den, she'd found her pack, her purpose, her place in the world. And no amount of winter could touch the warmth of that. Spring had come to Frost Hollow at last, and with it, the promise of new life. Clara Moore, for that's who she was now, in heart if not yet in law, walked into her future with her head held high and her heart full of gratitude for the beautiful disaster that had brought her home. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, loss, and finding home in unexpected places. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss Clara, Elias, and little Lily's journey together. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover these frontier tales of hope and second chances. Your support means the world and helps keep these stories alive. Until next time, partners.